Hey all, thanks for tuning in to DuckBricks. Before we start this video, just to give some quick context, I was able to have the chance to do a really cool collaboration with the LEGO Group on the latest Ninjago book, Quest for the Lost Powers. I was able to produce several videos for their kids app, LEGO Life, where I actually had a discussion with some other really great Ninjago fans around the community. If you don't know the LEGO Life app, make sure to check it out, and you can find it on the App Store and the Google Play Store. You can find all sorts of cool content that's exclusive to the app. With that context out of the way, I was able to sit down and do a massive podcast video talking about this brand new Ninjago piece of canon content, but unfortunately had to cut it down to only 10 minutes when it aired on LEGO Life. Thank you to LEGO for giving me the opportunity to actually appear on the LEGO Life app. It is a really surreal experience seeing myself there, but of course I really wanted to be able to publish the full actual conversation we had because I think it's a pretty fun one, and hopefully you'll get something out of it hearing our full podcast discussion. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Thanks for tuning into DuckBricks. I'm Chris, and today we are joined by Ninjago fans from around the community to discuss in a book club format the latest LEGO Ninjago book, Quest for the Lost Powers. This is a canon Ninjago book which explains how the ninja got their powers back after Crystallize. It's actually really important to the story despite being a book that really doesn't feature anything that will appear in the TV show. And overall, I'm very excited to showcase this particular podcast episode because we are working with a couple of big folks in the Ninjago community who I've never collaborated with before until now. Now, full disclosure, LEGO has actually put us all together. LEGO were the ones to send us the book, and they asked us to do a podcast for LEGO Life and Lego.com. And we figured, well, while we're at it, why not just actually do a full-length podcast? LEGO asked us for 10 minutes, and we sure can talk a lot more than 10 minutes about this book, so I figured why not post our full podcast discussion on this channel so you can enjoy it. And of course, do let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of the book? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? And have you read it or not? Hopefully this may or may not convince you to read it. We will be going into spoiler territory though, so do be warned. There will be a lot of heavy spoilers covered here, but if you're okay with that, then we're ready to jump up, kick back, whip around, and spin right into our book discussion. Okay, so you're watching, I guess, DuckBricks. Thank you all for being here, and we have some exciting Ninjago community members here to discuss a brand new book, which is Quest for the Lost Powers. It's a canon Ninjago book that takes place after Crystallized. We all have quite a lot of thoughts on this, I think, so I'll let you all introduce yourselves, and we'll get into it.
So, hi, I'm Sean, also known as Mind, BricksByMind on YouTube.com. Just search BricksByMind, you can find me. I do a lot of LEGO set reviews most of the time, but I've also covered the show at points. I've been collecting Ninjago since it began in 2011. In fact, my 9th birthday party, I think it was Ninjago themed in 2011, so I've been following this franchise for a very long time, and I am still with it to this day. Very big fan.
Hey, I'm Ace, or MyBrickOpinions on YouTube, and I'm also a massive Ninjago fan. I've been collecting the brand since 2011 with the spinners, and I am, yeah, leave it there.
Hi, I'm ParachutingKitten, or Maya. I have a YouTube channel where we talk about random deep dives into Ninjago lore show-wise. And I also forced my roommates to watch the show. They've never seen it before, so that's also a great time.
All right, well, thank you all for being here. I know we have a lot to discuss, so we may as well just get into things. First of all, for some background, this is actually something that LEGO reached out to us to do. So for full transparency, LEGO came to all of us and asked us to do some discussions about the book. Yeah, there we go. So we all got copies of the book, and we are excited to talk about it because it is, despite not showcasing events that will be on the show, it is showcasing probably pretty relevant events leading into the new Ninjago series launching this summer. So a lot of opinions on that. And do we want to go in and talk about general book stuff first, or do we want to just jump right in? The way the book is formatted is there's 4 stories for the 4 ninja who lost their powers. We've got thoughts on each of the 4 stories. Do we want to talk about the book as a whole first, or do we want to start with the stories and get into that later?
I think we should do a non-spoilery book as a whole first, just I think what I have to say is basically I enjoyed the book, but my biggest complaint is what happens in the book should have happened in the show. Right? like, I don't know if you guys have any other opinions without getting into too much detail, but that is like my biggest take. Is like, well, I did really enjoy what I read. It's just like, it's going to be weird to get into the new show without if you haven't read this book.
Yeah, no, I think I agree on you. I agree with you on that. The book, there's elements of the book I enjoyed. There's elements I really didn't like. But overall, I think it's stuff you can't just leave on a book that most people aren't going to read. It's because like there's even for some characters, there's pretty relevant stuff that people wanted to see in the show, but now it's just here on a book, which I would have liked to see it on the show as well.
Yeah, I think overall the book is very cute, and I enjoyed myself like reading it through twice now, but it did feel like very important stuff that I would be missing if you jump into the new series. Like, oh, there's this one cliffhanger that they establish at the end of Crystallize, and that gets resolved in the book rather than the show, which seems a little backwards, but I had a good time regardless.
Yeah, I think, honestly, not much else I can say other than what's already been said. I felt that, Crystallize ended things with saying, okay, the ninja have lost their powers, and there was, like, one throwaway line that was like, oh, but they'll come back probably at some point. And I guess that people are just supposed to infer that, like, yes, indeed, they did come back. So I think that if they started the new show without, like, with their powers back like normal, and then just had a line that was like, yeah, they came back over time, I probably would have been okay with it. But now that we know how they came back, I do wish the information was in the show. So ironically, I feel that if this book didn't exist and they just randomly had their powers, I probably would have been like, okay, whatever. Like, they want to get into new stuff, let's just do it. But now that this exists, I'm like, yeah, well, I do wish that this was in the show. As you said, lots and lots of stuff that I think fans have been wanting to see in the show for a while that we've seen in the book. But the good thing is that you can read the book and get those stories, which are canon. To me, it felt a little bit like, without going into spoilers, I got a lot of like the season 1 Discovering Your True Potential vibes from it, where it was like each ninja has a focused story, they have their own side characters, we learn something about them. May have been something we already knew, may have been something the show has already done, but it was a focus on each of the characters, which was cool. So yeah, I liked it overall. It was nice.
Yeah, I feel mostly the same way. Is it like it was nice seeing the characters in this sense, and it did definitely give you season 1 vibes, but the thing is we are now 15 seasons in, so it's just a question of like why is it feeling like season 1 15 seasons in? It depends from story to story, which we'll get into, but some of it just felt like not that it's not something the show has done, but parts felt like the characters were forgetting elements of themselves that like they should have already moved past, but also the show itself has done that in countless seasons, so in that sense I guess it's pretty accurate.
I don't know if it's nostalgia, but I really enjoyed that feeling at times, even I don't want to dive into spoilers yet, but like some parts I was like sometimes I would just smile because it would remind me of season 1, and it would just bring that joy, like that the emotions I felt when I watched that in season 1. But then again, as you said, it's like the characters should be beyond this. Like, it shouldn't be a lesson they're learning again, or maybe for like the second time or the third time, right?
I will say one thing I did appreciate is it's very clear that the writers have seen the whole show and care about the show. It's not like, because a lot of times Ninjago is a kids franchise. A lot of times kids franchises will just like have random books made for young readers, and it really won't have too much to do with the show. But there is a lot of care put in. Like, there's references to most of the seasons, like, and more like quote unquote obscure things too, which we'll get into more with the spoiler territory. But like it is clear that the writers were very familiar with the characters, and even if, as we said, some things felt a little rehashy from the show, it at the very least acknowledged the show, right? It was not like a standalone thing. It was very much it feels like it can fit in the canon of the show, which I do appreciate.
The one thing that I think is interesting is that, I guess, considering the audience for this book, I'm not really sure who exactly is the targeted audience. Presuming it's supposed to be for younger kids to get like reintroduced to Ninjago or to be able to fill in the gaps. I think from that end of things, if it's like a young kid's first time reading a Ninjago book, maybe they've only seen Crystallize, maybe they've only been following Ninjago since season 11, then I think to that end, rehashing some old character arcs or storylines does kind of make sense, because if it's for younger kids to be able to experience it, they're not maybe going to go back and watch hours and hours of TV starting at like season 1. So this is like a way for them to kind of feel the same thing. But at the same time, I mean, asked us Ninjago fans to talk about it. Clearly they expect and want longtime fans of the show to want to read this and want to appreciate it. So then it's kind of a weird balance where, like, who exactly was this made for? Because if it was made for long-term fans, then it feels like stuff that long-term fans have already seen. But if it's made mostly for younger kids to read, why are we here? I guess that's the question. But regardless, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, I also got the sense that the book was like, it was written for a younger audience, because a lot of the times it goes back and it explains stuff from the show. Like, just so you know that happened, right? I don't know if you guys noticed that as well. Like, it would like overly explain situations that if you're a fan, you probably know, but like if you're maybe a younger fan and don't have that good of a memory, it refreshes that in your mind.
I think part of that is to just to help the book stand on its own. So even, like, if you're a kid in a library and this is your first time with anything for Ninjago, it gives you enough background. So I didn't mind that. I think that that fit well enough in it like, because it, like, yes, it's a sequel to the series, but as a book, it is not a sequel to anything. It is a standalone book. So I think I felt like, yes, it, like, if you are super knowledgeable in the show, it is a little like, oh, I already know this, but I did appreciate all that being there.
No, I appreciate it being there for like younger fans or newer fans, but like if this is meant to be a sequel to the show, like, what are you like if this is really that important to the show, like, why wasn't this in the show? Like, what we said earlier, right?
Yeah. Another.
I think on that note,
I do want to mention one more thing before we get to spoiler territory. One thing I absolutely loved about the book is the illustrations. They reminded me a lot of super classic, back in 2011, 2012, the card art that we used to get. It's done in a very similar style.
I have my cards near me. Let me check right here. Yeah, I have them.
But it helped make the book more immersive, I guess, because I could like obviously they describe what's going on, but actually seeing it too, it was very pretty. I very much like that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I love. I was one of my notes as well. Like, I love the art. I feel the book deserved more illustrations.
Yes.
It's the same art from the Spinjitzu Brothers books, which is pretty cool because I think it's the same author as well.
Okay.
So it's those I actually personally I think I had a lot more fun with those than this, because at least those were like completely original stories and were Wu and Garmadon doing new things. But it was cool to see this. May as well jump into spoiler territory. I'm guessing we've been at this for a few minutes now, and as we mentioned, we've got 4 stories for each of the 4 ninja, and this is geared towards mostly for younger readers. Each of them is kind of geared towards them overcoming a moral, a lesson, a personal growth that they each are able to kind of unlock within themselves. Some of them were stuff that we've seen before. Other ones, like for example Zane, it was covering a little bit more unique territory that was really interesting to see, that people have been wanting to see. But the first one that we hit is Kai. I think probably a good way to start these off is maybe we can give like a 1-minute recap of what happens in this chapter, so people know and people are caught up, so everybody who's talking about each chapter can give a quick recap. Essentially, the story for what happened with Kai this time was that after losing his powers, he's kind of sunk into a state of depression. He's really sad. He feels like he's useless. We've kind of seen this from Kai a few times in the show before, more than a few times, I think, but it is in character for him to feel useless without his powers. Because of this, he's kind of causing some trouble with Skylar. He's not really being that nice to her. He's being pretty rude, and Skylar's like, what's going on? And eventually he gets a call for help, and he learns that the Fire Fang from season 11, which I did not know was alive, is apparently has taken up residence in a crater, and a group of fire fiends, or like fire worshippers, people are started worshiping it and formed a cult, which happens a lot in Ninjago for some reason. So you've got the fire fiends. They now kind of have the Fire Fang under, they're worshiping it. It's helping them out. They're terrorizing a village. So Kai's like, okay, I'm gonna go try to save them and see what I can do. Skylar really kind of pushes him to do that, and really, most of the story was Kai rushing in and telling Skylar he doesn't need her. This happens a number of times. He rushes in, he realizes that he does in fact need her, and it's not until kind of the very end, the climax of the story, when Skylar comes in, saves Kai, and he realizes that despite the fact that he is a hero, the moral of the story is, well, there's an exact quote, but it was something like, I can't protect others unless I let other people protect me too, which is the moral that he learned. I think he's like kind of learned that before, but this made it very explicit. Like, this is his emotional barrier he's overcoming. He realizes that, he gets his fire powers back. So it was very much like a season 1 discovering true potential type story. And he and Skylar work together. She uses Amber to absorb his fire, and they defeat the Fire Fang, which explodes. So I guess it is dead now. Or returned to elemental energy, which is what they suggest at the end. They don't really know. It was a guess. And that's it. The story ends with Kai having learned a lesson to rely on others. So what did you all think of the Kai story?
So I personally enjoyed this one because it is like, yes, it was obviously it wasn't fun seeing how Kai treated Skylar at the beginning, but I appreciated that we got some development between the two of them, because despite being like presented as a like this is a romantic pairing since season 4, like we really haven't gotten much development on it. So finally getting a little bit of that was really nice, and it was just like, yeah, we had something crystallized too, but it was just like it was a whole story with no one else to distract him. It was about the two of them and about Kai learning to accept that like he can work with somebody else. But yeah, it did feel a little rehashy from season 11, but on the other hand, they do explicitly mention season 11 and try to rationalize why it's different. Whether you think that was good enough or not, that's up to you. But yeah, I enjoyed it overall, but I would not call it my favorite story in the book.
I think we just, well, I'm just gonna flat out say this was my least favorite story in the book. I did not like this one at all. I don't know. It was just Kai just constantly can we all agree that the Skylar relation, the Kai and Skylar relationship was not it. It was very toxic at times. I was like, why is Skylar like with this guy? Like, it's just like really, it was just written in a way where I was like, I knew eventually Kai was gonna like find like redeem himself. Can't speak right now. He was gonna redeem himself. You get my point. But I don't know. Like, I knew I could see where the story is going, but like I was not enjoying it. And obviously, Kai as a character, he's changed a lot since season 1, right? He's been written in different ways. I personally don't really like how he is written in the like later seasons of Ninjago. And while I remember, like while it is consistent with how he is written, I would have preferred if they just wrote the Kai's characters a bit more mature, less ignorant, and Skylar deserves better. Come on.
Yeah, I will say I was a little disappointed because I guess the book starts out, I guess before even the Kai story, by setting up that like after the events crystallized, the team is kind of split and like crimes run rampant in the city. I don't know how I feel about that, because that's what happens at the end of Seabound, and like the beginning of Crystallized is the learning about, oh hey, we have to continue to work together as a team, but immediately as something else goes wrong again, they just split up again. I don't know.
It's also contradictory because, you know, at the end of Crystallized, it's framed obviously as the big triumph and we all gave up our powers, but we're stronger for it and we saved the day. But then the implication is that like a week after that, everybody was like, I'm so useless, this sucks, we gotta leave. And it's like, guys, that's the end of the show. And now it's just like, it goes downhill so quickly.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting. Oh, no, go on, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to make one little is off note, unrelated to anything else, but the fact that Firefang's alive implies that Char could still be alive, and that means a lot to me.
Yes, Char lives. Yeah, no, I mean, when I was reading the book, I was initially like quite, I don't know if off-put is the way to phrase it, but how Kai was treating Skylar, I was like, oh wow, that's like pretty bad, like how he's like acting around her, and it was almost like too real, like the way that I was like, wow, this is just like a toxic relationship, she shouldn't be with him. And I think I was hoping that like Skylar got a bigger apology near the end. It seemed like mostly Kai made it about himself, where he was like, yeah, well, I need to realize that I need other people to help me, but there was less about like, sorry about how I treated you, which felt a little bit strange to me. But I think for like a simplified kid story about knowing to rely on others and knowing that you can't do everything by yourself, it was okay. It's just the first story, just starting off the gate with that, and I'm like, whoa, I did not like remember their dynamic to be this toxic, but I guess that was because they were trying to emphasize like how off his game he was when he lost his powers. I don't know.
I think also it's like the relationship between the two of them, it would work a little bit better if they were in a long-term relationship. Like if they had the relationship Jay and Nia did, it's like, okay, Kai is in this dark place, but they've been together so long, Skylar knows that this isn't who he is. But in reality, what we see in the show is they like crystallizes really the first semblance of a real relationship between them, and it's just, and that's how this story ends too, is them being like, okay, we're gonna start this for real. So I mean, I get maybe she's just a really forgiving and understanding person, but she does treat him with a lot of kindness for how he's treating her, which is like, given that the relationship is not really that deep in this moment, that is a lot of charitability that she is giving him.
And she comes back though.
If you
like,
could see,
oh, sorry. No, you
I
go,
was just
you go,
gonna
Maya.
the notes that I have on my digital copy of like, yikes, get out of there, leave him, like so many times. And like, aside from that, like obviously as we get into the story, he keeps on like shoving her aside, and it's very rude and bad and whatever. But even how the story starts, like just imagine you work at like a very busy restaurant, and every day this guy comes in and like in this dirty old sweatshirt sits down and starts slurping noodles and trying to talk to you. He's never asked you out before, but he seems to think that you're in a relationship, and you're like, dude, I'm working here. Every day this guy comes in and like he thinks when you ask him about it, he's like, is that not a date? And you're like, no, no, it's not a date. Get out of here. Anyway, don't stalk women at work. Maybe not. I mean, they know each other obviously, but also just like very weird vibes coming out the gate in this story.
That's what I mean. Like the very first story to read, I was like, "Whoa, okay." I mean, we're going there here," which I guess was kind of new. I mean, the one thing that I did appreciate was that they haven't really done that before in the show. It was something new, that it was a dynamic to their relationship, and dynamic that we've never seen before, because they haven't had a dynamic really before this book. They've kind of just been, Skylar's been in the background, crystallized. She was like a little action figure. They had her in the background, so people go like, oh, look at Skylar, and then she doesn't say anything or do anything. But no, she actually like got to do stuff here and had like some characterization, which I did really appreciate. Overall, I think for me, this story it wasn't my least favorite. It wasn't my favorite either. I'm guessing a lot of our favorites is going to be the same story, but we'll see. Maybe we'll find out next. But I did like, I mean, I think I understand the intent behind the story. It was just a weird place to start, with him being so hostile to Skylar, her being kind of like accepting of that and still trying to help him throughout the course of the story, and then having the resolution at the end was a good resolution for Kai's emotional arc. But I can't help this feeling that Skylar kind of got shafted here, where she just like has to go along for the ride the entire time, and then Kai overcomes this barrier, and she's just like, okay, well, I mean, I guess he's good now, and it is what it is. But wasn't like bad. I think it was interesting. I loved seeing Firefang back. I'm a sucker for all the references going back in the show and back in time, so that was really cool to see an old villainous creature. But yeah, not my favorite, not my least favorite. Just kind of average for me.
I thought it was a weird choice to bring back. I mean, I liked it. Like, I like the idea of like this cult, you know, the Fire Fiends, like build around this cult around Firefang. But like, I don't know. I just felt like out of all the enemies, I was like, oh, I mean, it felt like it was just it just wanted to tie loose ends. Like that's the vibe I got. Like it just felt like, oh, we have this loose end, let's tie it up with the story, and let's give Kai his powers back. That's what I felt.
The weird thing is, I didn't even think
Also,
the Firefang was a loose end. I thought it was dead.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
go on. Yeah.
I did not think of it as a loose end until I read the
No,
book
I was
as well.
like, yeah.
And he just poops at the end of this story as well. So it kind of resolved itself exactly the same way that it did the first time. So it might still be a loose thread.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I think we've spent enough time on the Kai story. May as well move on to what I guess is probably the most interesting one for most of us. It's a story that Tommy Anderson, Ninjago creator, has been wanting to include in the show for a while. He recently revealed in an interview that he wanted to include it, but got some pushback from the writers. They wanted to make it more comedic. He wanted to make it more serious. This time, the book does actually take in that story, makes it a little bit more serious, which is great. And that is Zane finally facing the Ice Emperor. So, Sean, why don't you take it away?
Okay, so chapter 2 is of course about Zane. So it begins with Pixel and Zane. I believe they're back at the Samurai X cave, right? Yes,
I think so. Yeah.
So, and they are essentially running diagnostics on Zane to try to tap into his memories and figure out what is stopping him from regaining his elemental powers. And the story, it's a really weird structure because it's not like you start here, you end here. It's a journey through Zane's memories, and he revisits the same ones over and over again and does different things, but it's really well done. I love how this goes. So it starts like he goes back to when Dr. Julian turns off his memory switch, and then it eventually right. So it goes back to when Dr. Julian turns off his memory switch, and then also for the first time ever shows the time period in between him turning off his memory switch and Wu meeting Zane at the bottom of the lake. And we see how Zane, despite not having any memories, is still working as a hero. We see the tree horns are back, which that's what made me go, okay, the writers of this book, like, they care about the show, because tree horns are like, they were in one episode in season 1, but like, that made me very happy to see. But then the story ends up culminating in Zane meeting up with himself as the Ice Emperor, and he essentially just gets terrified and he can't face it. But eventually he learns to face it, and there's like a fight scene between himself and himself as the Ice Emperor, and he learns that he was trying to fight back while he was the Ice Emperor, but Vex's control is too strong, and he learns to forgive himself for his time as the Ice Emperor because he realizes that was one of the biggest things holding him back, and then after that he comes out of the memory and he has now regained his powers. So my thoughts is, obviously, I love this story. Zane is my favorite ninja, but this is also just something that I have been wanting to see in the show forever. Unfortunately, this book probably means it will never be seen in the show, but I also think at this point it's probably too late for the show, so I'm glad it was at least covered somewhere. Because at the end of season 11, I was like, okay, it's weird that they're not addressing it, but maybe season 12 will start with it, but then after season 12, it was just no longer a thing. So I'm glad it was finally covered, and I appreciated that they went back and filled that gap in season 1 too, because that was something I didn't need to see, but it was something I was always curious about, and I thought that was really cool to see, and helped me appreciate Zane more as a character, which is impressive to say when this is a character that's been around for 11 years. There's still more things to learn about him. But what'd you guys think?
Yeah. For me, I mean, like you, Zane is my favorite character. Like you, this was a story I was dying to see. I think when we got teased with the one episode title leaking, of course, the one title that leaked from Crystallize was Return of the Ice Emperor. And I was like, yes, let's go. We're finally having it. And then I'm like, oh no, this is not what we wanted. So it was fun. It was really, really great. I think it was so cool to be able to see this actually be covered. As you said, unlikely it would ever be covered in the show. So it's really nice how we did get it covered at some point. There were a lot of things I liked about it. I think one of my favorite things was the snowboarding Zane felt like a reference to Zane's original concept. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but even the drawing felt very similar to, for those who don't know, when Ninjago was first being conceptualized, all the ninja had like a different gimmick to them, where like one of them was a dancer, one of them played video games, and Zane was the snowboarder. And they kind of didn't really do that in the show, but that was like a lot of concept art came out around Zane being the snowboarder, so I really did like that. I also love that they actually referenced going back to Tournament of Elements, where Zane had kind of a crisis of identity, and he was trying to figure out, he was like, I'm not the White Ninja, I'm just a replica. That was the most interesting thing, I think, to me that happened to Zane, where it's like, if he quote-unquote dies this many times, is it still the real Zane? And that's a pretty deep like concept to cover in a kids show. So they didn't really go into it that much. I'm surprised they even managed to have it in Tournament of Elements, but it was really cool to see that revisited again. I think having him kind of finally face it again and overcoming it in a book was so cool. And I remember back in Tournament of Elements when that episode came out, I was like, wow, this is something really interesting that they could do with Zane's character. I was skeptical about bringing him back after the sacrifice, but I was on board when he said that line, "Am I just a replica?" And they didn't really do anything about it. So it was cool to see that. And then, of course, all the references going back, finally facing the Ice Emperor. That was good.
For me, like I would just find myself smiling from ear to ear, like just going through like the Zane's memories, going back to tournament, seeing the Ice Dragon, the Elemental Ice Dragon, then going back to Zane meditating underwater. Like, because for me, I don't know, there's so much nostalgia in the pilot season and season 1, and going back to the forest, going back to Dr. Julian's what's it called, lair, or like his hiding spot.
It's true.
Like just
workshop.
Workshop. Like just going back to all those locations, it brought me like so much joy. And then what you were saying earlier, like, I am the white ninja, then I am the titanium ninja, and then I am the Ice Emperor. That transition, and I don't know. I really like the pacing of this chapter, because for me, like the first, like the Kai's arc, it was kind of a bit of a drag. Like I would be like, sometimes I would skim through it, but no, like Zane, it would just hook me, and I read through it once, and I was like, I need to relive that again. It's one of those things where, like, at first I was like kind of not impressed by the book, but then once I got to Zane's, I was like, okay, no, this book has my attention now. And then I really, really enjoyed Zane's arc, but it's not my favorite though. I have another favorite. I have another one I think can fight for the best arc in this book. But like, let's hear out Maya now.
So I really like this one. I think it totally makes sense that out of all of the ninja, Zane has the like internal journey, while all of them have these like external conflicts. Is like entirely takes place in his mind. It's Inception for Zane. But I like that everything fit his character very well. But I did feel like it was maybe a lot of retread. There's one chapter that it's just straight up 2 scenes from the show kind of transcribed, and that's the whole chapter. And I was like, it was a short chapter, but I feel like we could have had something else in there. And also I think that I will say I've read a lot of fan fiction that covered this topic a lot better. And of course it's like a kid's book, so you can't go that in depth with it, but it kind of takes it back to I don't think they really considered the implications of all of the fallout of the Ice Emperor when they made Zane the Ice Emperor. And so this book did the best it could, but it definitely wasn't like it felt a little easy to get past this whole I was an evil attempted genocidal emperor for 60 years. And all he had to realize was just that, like, oh, but I'm a good person, it's fine. And over the course of a day, he's like, yeah, oh, okay, it clicked, I get it. But for what they were working with, I think they did really well.
Yeah, I think the biggest misstep for me going back to season 11 was making it such that Zane actually like killed not just people, but like killed an entire race of beings. If the worst thing he did was freezing people in like suspended animation and they get unfrozen at the end, then I think it would have been fine. But the fact that they added in the one line where it's like he wiped out Crag's family, they are all dead, here's all the empty beds, I'm like, oh my god, like, so that's like not something that you can just be like, I'm a good person. Like, I wouldn't have actually done that. I wasn't in control. And funnily, that is the one thing he did that they don't mention in the book at all. They mention him freezing people. They mention him terrorizing people. They don't mention that he killed like an entire race of beings, which felt a little bit weird to me, but I guess you don't really want to bring that up in a book meant for kids. But I think that was more of a mistake of season 11 than it was a mistake for the book. I agree with you, Maya, when you say, like, in terms of if they had to address it, this feels like the best way they could have done it because they can't take it too seriously. I wish it was more serious? Yes. This isn't Bionicle. This is Ninjago. This is especially this book is mostly for kids. But I think going back to your point about like entire chapters being rehashes of the show, I think this was really where I started feeling I wish this was part of the show, because I think it's different if you're like rewatching a classic scene, but maybe from a different angle. Like if they were to reanimate an old scene with the same like voices and everything from a different angle and show like Zane watching it, that would be so cool. I'm fine with like big chunks of that just being old scenes then. But in a book format, reading it, it was like, well, yeah, I mean, I know this happened. We've all the show. So I think this story in particular, I was like, I wish they made this into like an episode. But yeah.
I also think part of the reason why this one stuck out to me as opposed to some of the other stories is the fact that we've never really seen this from Zane in the show. Like, we've had like the team split off before. Like obviously we had season 4, season 15, and then like Kai split off at 11, and there's like been characters that have done it before. But Zane was dead in between 3 and 4, and it crystallized. He had like the emotional thing that he had to overcome, but he was one of the team members who stuck around. So this was the first time like we had Zane split off. So unlike the others where it's like, haven't you gotten over this? Zane is like, he's never really felt like he's had to do it before, so him doing it for the first time doesn't really seem like too much of a rehash to me because it is something entirely new. And I think that's what helped this story stick out for me.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely is a big part of why it sounds like all of us really liked it. I think that's seeing something new from Zane was very cool. It's something we've wanted to be addressed. I definitely agree it could have been done better. The resolution, especially where it's, I think the only minor complaint that I do have about the resolution was that not only did they skip over the really bad stuff that he did, but they imply that he was semi-cognizant of what he's doing and even like resisted against it, which I guess was part of his realization that it was like, yes, I was fighting back, so that makes it okay. It wasn't me doing it. It was, I got reprogrammed, but I was fighting back. But now it feels like, oh, well, if he was kind of like aware of what he was doing and even resisting, now it implies that, well, he just didn't like resist hard enough, so he could have avoided all of this if he just like had, I guess, enough mental willpower within himself to overcome the Ice Emperor persona early on. I think that maybe I personally thought that they were going to go in the direction of he was like, oh wow, I have no memories of this because I was a different person. It wasn't me. It was like it was someone else, which is how he's able to forgive himself because it like wasn't him at all. But now that it knows like, yeah, it was me. I was kind of aware, but I wasn't able to fight back. I don't know how I feel about that. It's interesting.
It's definitely, it's like, season 11 just put everything in such a weird place. It's like, how do you write yourself out of that? How do you have, like, one of the most, like, good characters in your show do such horrible acts of evil and then just be like, how do you explain that away? It is, I don't know, and that is a season 11 issue, not an issue with this book, but it is, like, they did write themselves into such a corner with that in the show that it's like, where do you even go with that?
Yeah. You go to Prime Empire.
Yeah, apparently. I always have like this
really
crack. Oh yeah, go on.
Mm-hmm. No, I was just gonna say one thing I think that they did do really well in addressing it is it's kind of implied that it's like he's been actively repressing that trauma because every time he like comes to face with it the first time, he's like, no, we can't do that. Like like you can tell that he has specifically avoided thinking about it, which kind of in retrospect makes Prime Empire like makes sense because he's ignoring the trauma, and so it makes sense that it's completely glossed over in a way.
Yeah, it explains why he became an old-timey detective, is to ignore the trauma.
Yes, that is exactly. I mean, it's a natural progression.
A bunch of new data.
I always had this like crackpot theory that it was like Zane was supposed to like die or go away at the end of season 11. That's why he like wasn't in any of the season 12 sets and barely in like season 12's story. But then they realized that like I was like, maybe someone at Lego stepped in and was like, no, we don't want to kill off one of the main characters, and that's why it just got no resolution. Everyone pretends that it didn't happen. Like nobody mentions it at all, and like at the end of the season, it only is resolved like in the last episode. I mean, I asked Tommy on this on Twitter. He was like, no, it was always like supposed to be that way. But I don't know if you would have like said if they ever had any other plans either, because it just felt so weird to me. Again, this is a season 11 thing, but it's just like so weird how like just wasn't in the sets for season 12, barely in the story. It almost feels like he wasn't supposed to be in it to begin with, and they just kind of threw him in. Like they had we'll make one episode focused around him just to throw him in because he's alive. Changed our minds. I don't know, it's just a weird thing they did. But I'm glad it was addressed here.
And in season 11, they kind of set up like, oh, hey, maybe Nia could be a ice ninja instead, and then that never comes back either.
Right. So it all adds up. But I think
called fear of fan backlash.
Yeah. Funnily enough, they got more by just keeping him alive and not mentioning it, I think. But we'll see. We probably have talked enough about Zane. Might as well make sense to move over to Cole.
Let's move over to
Cole. The one interesting thing. Yeah, the thing that's interesting to me is that I just realized this, but we actually are having an opportunity, for those who don't know, we're going to get the chance to interview the author of half of the book, Tracy West. I'm seeing at the front of the book, it says Kai and Zane stories by Tracy West, but Cole and Jay stories by Adam Beechin. So this is actually a book that was written by two different people. I personally did not even realize that until just now I'm looking at the PDF. So for me, I think that's interesting because they had a bit of a different vibe going in from like Kai and Zane, and Cole and Jay did feel pretty distinct to me. And it's interesting seeing how they were actually written by two different people. But I think it's now time to just jump into the summary of what happened in the Cole chapter.
Yeah, no, for me, the Cole chapter was the most strict to the point. Like they didn't have really, like, it starts off with Cole is being a farmer. Why is he a farmer? Who knows? But Cole is in a farm, and he is visited by his dad. And we were introduced to, I forgot the names. It was Henry and what's the other? Oh, let me look up.
Sally Bob?
Yeah, Sally Bob. And Cole is helping them out and protecting them from the, what's it called? Warrior truck? No, truck warriors, right?
The war tractors, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, the war tractors. And the whole idea or the whole concept of this story is Cole is here helping them or protecting them from the war tractors, and his dad comes him to motivate him. And it's a lot of Cole and Lou bonding time, which I found really, really good. That's what really elevated for me this story. It was all that time we spent with Cole and Lou. And by the end, it becomes a bit more straightforward. It's Cole finds that his true strength is with his family, and he regains his powers and protects all those who need protecting, right? We kind of retread a bit of the season 13 arc, right? Or the Master of the Mountain arc. But I don't know, there's something for me, there was something there with Lou, having it be, because originally when I read the prologue, right, and it says Cole's now a farmer. I kind of had this like idea of what the story is going to be about, and I was like, why didn't they go with the Kai direction? Why didn't we send Cole to Shintaro with Vanya and try to help him regain his powers there? But then once I started reading this arc or these 5 chapters, I understood, like, because I realized we really haven't spent that much time with Cole and Lou outside of season 1, right? Like, when's the last like Cole and Lou episode we had? Season 1, right?
Yeah.
That's the only episode. So I really appreciated that aspect of having Cole and Lou have all this bonding time, and I really like that aspect that it kind of grows upon what was established in season 13, with having Cole's mom be a warrior. But then Lou take care of Cole, and that aspect of this father and son dynamic, and Cole's mom is always out there protecting people, but somebody has to protect Cole, right? And I don't know, there's something about father and son stories that always grab me, and this time I don't know why, I just connected with the story, and I really had a good time with it. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
So I really honestly, I could care less about the whole powers aspect of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what really shined for me was the Cole and Lou dynamic. What really hit me was the way, like, it felt like it really filled the gap for Master of the Mountain for me, because, like, I loved Lily's story in Master of the Mountain, but it was just like there was such a difference between the Lou we saw in season 1 and the Lily we saw in season 13. And it's like these two were in love once, right? They had a kid together. What is the story there? And this story, I feel like, perfectly fills that gap, showing like the role they each played, why they liked each other, and like what that relationship was. And it just, I loved it. It was the most grounded. Like there's no grand adventure here, and like the enemies are very much like, they're not the focus of the story for me, but even still, I love, like, it aside from Zane's, this is easily my second favorite of the stories. Like,
yeah, the enemies are kind of forgettable. Like I forgot, like I knew they were tractor themed, but I forgot, like they even had a name, but I already forgot the name.
Yeah.
Of the main villain. But like it's one of those stories where like going back to what was Chris said earlier, it's the author, right, or the writer. Like you really get a sense of like where the writer came, or what was his point with telling his story. It's more about, you know, telling this narrative, because in a way it's very similar to Kai's, right? It's about Kai's like like the lesson with Kai learned is it's about trusting others, and lesson Cole learned, it's about taking strength from your family. And I in a way I feel it's a very similar, right? It's about trusting other people and finding strength in that connection. But I just felt Cole's was way better executed.
Maya, do you have any thoughts on this?
I am putting together to
Sure.
not react to you guys.
Sure.
Like it's a very straight up wholesome story. I don't have that much to say because it's just like very pleasant and nice, and
Yeah.
it's not anything new. Like it's Cole and his dad bonding over performing, and flashback scene of, you know, his parents dance. We've seen this before, but it's all very cute and wholesome, and I enjoyed it, and it's great. Like even like you can tell Cole is by far the best of the four at coping with trauma. Kai's pestering his not quite girlfriend. Zane is like, we need to rewire my brain, and Cole's just like, I guess I could try being a farmer. That sounds kind of fulfilling, and it is, and that's it. You know, so a very, very nice story. I don't have that much to say, just because it's just a pleasant little time.
A very minor thing I want to point out is the leader of the villains is a classic Lego Ninja minifigure. He's a samurai from the classic Ninja theme, and I saw that. I was like, wow, that is very cool, because I that's like the one classic Ninja minifigure I own. I'm like, oh, that's canon now. That is a canon Ninjago minifigure now.
Oh, that was the coolest thing for me, seeing that. I think I found it hard to focus on the story as soon as the illustration came up, because I was like, oh, there it is. Like, oh, there's that old that old ninja figure. Yeah, that was awesome. I find it funny because I'm going through my notes, and I had like a ton of stuff to say about the Kai stuff, and I had even more stuff to say about Zane. And then for Cole, I had one line. Yeah, this one was pretty chill and wholesome, but that fits Cole's vibe. Yeah. And I think that was like the only note I had on the story, which is a positive note, because that was I think it was a really like nice story to get for Cole. He doesn't have a lot of like deep trauma, I guess, to overcome that hasn't been already addressed in the show. And clearly, as we've said, he seems to be the most well-adjusted with coping with like losses and loss of stuff, which is in line with his character. He has had a lot to lose in the show, and in his background. So I think it makes sense that this was kind of just a nice, like, calm story where he got to spend some time with his dad, who we saw Lau and crystallize, but he didn't really do anything. I think like Day of the Departed was the last time like he said anything. I might be wrong. I might be forgetting something.
Yeah,
I feel like Day of the Departed may have been. Yeah. So it's cool to actually get like something for him to do, and like something that deepens their relationship, because again, we haven't really seen that since season 1. And the Day of the Departed, he showed up, sang a song, and that was it. So oh, Hands of Time, he did also like sing, I think.
I don't remember anything from Hands of Time that season.
Yup. It's insane. Okay, well, if there's nothing else to say about Cole, why don't we hop on over to Jay's story, which is the final story of the book.
All right, so the Jay's story is maybe the most whack of the stories. So Jay and Mia are on an island as like vacation, but Jay is in a funk because he's lost his powers and he's connecting it back to, and I never met my mom, angstiness. And so he wanders off into the island and immediately gets lost and runs into Unagami, who is there. Who cares why? He's just there. And so they're wandering around in the forest. Unagami is looking for like this lost civilization, which they then find, and then they like read these scrolls about, oh, this civilization raised children as a group. And Jay goes, oh, it's like all my friends and my adopted family are my family. Whoa. And then they like immediately destroy the civilization because they set off a booby trap. And so I think Unagami gets knocked out. And so Jay has to like carry him and escape while dodging a bunch of rocks. Anyway, crazy setup. And then Mia's like, I knew you were gonna get lost. I put a tracker on you. And that's the story. Which is just, I mean, I like all of like the Unagami Jay dynamic is cute. I love that we got to see more of it. It is just so random how they decided to make them interact was to put them on an island and get them lost, have them both be on this random island. Whatever, here we are. We got some cute interactions. That's all I needed. I do think it is weird that he is, because of course the whole climax of Prime Empire is him explaining his, baggage with his parents, being like, it's okay, I've come to terms with it and you can too. And then in this story, suddenly Unagami has to be the one to teach him, like, no, it's okay, remember? Like, you told me this, bro. He doesn't say that, but that's what I was thinking the whole time. I'm like, dude, you should know this. This is the guy that you told this to. Anyway, so definitely a bit of a rehash arc-wise, although I don't think we've seen it addressed explicitly in the show. Like, it's always sort of implied or on the outskirts. Like, season 12's end reveal comes right out of nowhere. There was no setup earlier in the season.
Yeah,
so in some ways, it is fair game because we haven't seen this arc before, but also it's been heavily implied that this arc happened off screen several times. So it is weird to have it come up again. A lot of mixed feelings about that. But overall, despite the wacky setup, I did have a lot of fun with this story.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you. If I were like thinking back the stories, I would just describe this one as like kind of whack or weird. Not in a bad way, but I was just kind of surprised. I think we probably all know that the original idea behind Prime Empire was to explain what happened to Jay's mom and that she was like powering this game. I kind of was expecting when Unagami showed up that, oh, we're finally going to find out what happened to his mom. But no, it didn't happen. But like me being disappointed, that's on me. That's not on the book. Like, because I just like know, just like we all know something behind the scenes that like no one else reading the book is probably gonna know. So I got really excited when Unagami showed up, and I was like, oh, we're finally gonna actually find out about this, because I mean, at this point, the show's never addressing it. Like the time to address it has come and gone ages ago. And then now they just kind of like, Unagami's just kind of there, and then they just happen across a civilization which conveniently happens to have raised their kids in a group. And everything felt a little bit convenient. Like a lightning bolt. Yes, it just so happens. Yeah. No, a lot of like weird conveniences in the story, but for what it is, cool seeing Unagami back. I'm still so hung up on like, I really wanted to know like what was the deal with Jay's like mom and like dad, what happened there, and knowing that there was a story that related to Unagami that was going to be told, but they decided not to. I guess probably because they figured out it was like too much of a complicated callback to have to explain like what happened with Jay's parents. It's a little bit, it's disappointing for me because I was just really looking forward to that when Unagami showed up, and then when it didn't happen, I was like, oh, okay, well, this was nice, but I was hoping they would do something else.
Yeah, with this one, it was just this was my least favorite story in the book, and it's the only one of the three that like felt like it didn't really like. It was not the logical conclusion. Like, say what you will about Kai's characterization in the first story, but there was a story there, right? Kai is down, and then he goes out to seek his powers. This one's just like, they're on a vacation, and then Unagami happens to be there, and then they happen to find a thing. And I thought it was gonna, like... And then I don't even get, like, the whole point of the ancient tribe thing, because, like, I thought the lightning bolt-shaped thing was gonna be like, oh, this is... Like, it had something to do with his powers or something, because, like, I thought it was gonna tie back... Like, even though that would be a big coincidence, I'm like, okay, at the very least, like, he's learning something. But no, it's just some random civilization to teach him a lesson that he already kind of learned. And you mentioned how, like, it was never explicitly stated, but I feel like the lesson was pretty clear in the final few episodes of Skybound when he, like, he loses Nia, and the first person he goes to is his parent, like, his adopted parents, and they help pick him back on the right track, and then he goes and recruits his, like, new ninja team. And like that indicates to me that was him realizing, oh hey, the other parents they weren't here for me, but when I was at my lowest, my adopted parents were here. So I don't know. It's just like it felt like things just sort of happened to happen, and unlike the other stories, like I don't know. There's just so many coincidences. There's just I found it hard to be engaged with this one.
I enjoyed the pairing of I enjoyed the setup. I enjoyed the pairing. I thought like the pairing was something unexpected, but I really felt like this was a missed opportunity, because I really thought like this, if you were to tell this story, this would have been the perfect place to tell the story. And then just like I feel they kind of like baited us into like thinking the story is gonna go that way, and it's like nope, actually the lesson of the story is you already have a family. You know, it's kind of like thing like yeah, but, like I still want to know what happened, right? Like the fact Jay has he already has an adopted family does not take away from the fact like we want to know what happened to Jay's mom, and it feels like it just doesn't have a resolution. Even the ending is like, oh, he got his powers back. I guess that's good, right?
Another thing is, the more I think about it, is like I feel like there's missed opportunities here, because like, you know, we do have a canonical lightning-based tribe that lives on an island that they could have visited instead, and that could have been like, oh, hey, I'm going to go seek out the other people who worship lightning because maybe I'll get my powers back. And then there, the keepers talk about, oh, hey, you know, we raise our kids as a group. And, like, if that's where he learned it, I would have felt like that was a more logical conclusion, but just, like, he happens to be on, I don't know. I feel like there were better ways to go about this.
Yeah, no, it's like, in execution, I enjoyed I just thought I enjoyed the pacing of this one a bit more than the Kai one. Maybe it's just because Kai's my favorite ninja, so like I really didn't like how they did Kai in his story, and I didn't really mind what they did with Jay, but I felt there was like such a missed opportunity with the story.
Yeah, I will say I did enjoy the character moments. Like Unagami and Jay is a very cute dynamic. It was just like I had to focus in on what the characters were doing, because what was actually happening, and I couldn't really care about.
Yeah, and also like the resolution is really fast. Like they find the civilization, and then there's like, oh, booby trapped. It's time to go.
Yeah, I think for me, I liked the moral of the story. I think that the lesson being that like your family can be found family, it doesn't need to be people you are actually related to, is great. Like that's a lesson that is an important one to teach kids. But as I agree that the execution felt very convenient and almost forced, that not only is it a lesson that he told Unagami, the character in question, like a couple seasons ago, but it's also something that like, did Jay really need to learn that? I don't know. He's never really seemed like he cared that much about finding out about like what happened with his real family anyways. I mean, even in Skybound, after like Cliff Gordon dies, he doesn't even seem to care that much. He's just like, oh cool, I have a mansion now. And like it didn't really seem to affect him whatsoever. So I don't know. It was an interesting thing to cover. A good lesson for a book for kids, I think, but in terms of tying back to Jay's character in the show, and in terms of like it almost feels like they use him as a vessel to to make the story have a moral, or like they figured out what the moral of the story would be for each individual chapter first, and then they were like, okay, which ninja do we give, like which character do we assign them to? And then Jay's like the last one there, and they're like, okay, well, I'll just give him this one and come up with a reason as to why he learns this. And it felt very much like we are coming up with reasons as to why he is learning this. But yeah, I don't know.
I will say, I think one of you wrote this in the notes document, I forget who, but you mentioned that like it makes a little more sense if you think of it as Jay got in this funk because he lost his powers, because his powers were the one thing from his birth mother that he still had, and I don't believe he lost his powers at any point since finding out about, because possession was the only other time he lost them. So that's interesting, but again, it's just like it's back to he's never seemed to care about it before, so I have a tough time believing he'd care about it now.
Yeah, I think, again, going along with any time you bring up Jay's parentage baggage, I always have to wonder, is Cliff Gordon still alive? Because Skybound got rewound, right? And the wish that he wished basically killed Cliff Gordon. So he really wanted to connect with his biological family. Has he not reached out to him? Is he? Maybe there's a canon answer out there.
I may be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure someone asked Tommy about that, and he said that Nauticon cannot actually kill somebody, but Jay he sped up the fact that Jay found out about his death.
Right.
It was like Cliff Gordon always died around that time, but Jay wasn't supposed to find out for a while.
Convenient.
Well,
no, very convenient.
Wish
but
logic in Skybound is
like
very convenient.
Also, Tommy tweets take with a grain of salt, because
that's true.
I mean, some of them are like, okay, that makes sense, but others I'm like, I don't know if I trust that. I know you created the show, but anyway, but I always have to wonder, and it is a little weird to me that they've never like addressed that and been like whatever. Or like he has, even if he did die, he has a whole mansion of stuff that he can go and look through, and you can have a scene of him reminiscing. Like you have the dad that you can try and make connections through, my dude. Anyway, also like wasn't his mom on the team with like Ray and Maya, right?
Yeah.
Can he talk to them? Like, there's so many avenues for you to find out about your mom. Your mother-in-law can tell you, right? If you really cared this much, you would have tried a little harder.
I also have to say, I didn't like how Nia was sidelined in the story. I mean, I guess Jay Nunagami's a new dynamic and Jay and Nia isn't, but with Nia was already kind of sidelined and crystallized, it would have been nice to see them reconnect a bit more, but she was just in the beginning and the end. It's just like, at that point, did she need to be in it at all? Because I don't think I would have minded as much if it was just Jay Nunagami, but the fact that Nia was there and they just took her out of the picture, that like, I was like, why even put her there in the first place, you know?
Also, the fact that they teased that she's getting back her powers as well, and that's the whole premise of this book.
Yeah.
Like, I know that she's not intertwined with them, but, you know, there's a parallel there.
Yeah.
To take a counter viewpoint, I do think that, you know, you had the first two stories that were explicitly intertwined with the not quite girlfriends. Wherever the status on Pixel is in this book, she's a very close. Having all of the girlfriends be directly tied in with the arc would be a little on the nose. So the fact that she's, you know, swapped out for a different character is nice, but that doesn't mean, you know, maybe having her involved with Kai's arc in some way, or, you know, you can pair her up with someone else. You can pair her up with Zane or with Colt, and maybe they're doing stuff. She's friends with them too, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how they explicitly went out to frame the book about like, here are the four characters we're only going to give focus to, and none of the other ninja they're not going to do anything else. On the one hand, I mean, Nia deserves a vacation. I think it's like she got to relax during the story, you know, that's good for her. On the other hand, it's like, it's as you said, especially coming out of Crystallized, where she was really shafted. Now this feels like, okay, well, she's just getting tossed aside again. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like on the counter hand, after Crystallized, I'm also sick of seeing like all of Jay's scenes be only related to Nia and have them just kind of be in their own corner and their own world. So I'm kind of happy that he got somebody else to talk to at least. But yeah, you know, mixed feelings for sure.
I just think like I don't mind that they weren't paired up, but I just think if they were going to do that, she just shouldn't have been in the story at all, because I feel like introducing her just to write her immediately out is just like Lloyd wasn't in any of the stories, and that was perfectly fine because he had nothing. But like, if the journey is about Jay and she's not supposed to be a part of it, like it just feels like they're sidelining her again to tease her at the beginning and then just write her immediately out and then bring her back at the very
also
end.
in the prologue, it was set up that Jay was like he disappeared, right? Like he out there saving the world, and then Jay disappeared, and then in the Jay's chapter, it's like, oh, Jay and Nia are together in this island, and it's like, oh, so if you know where Nia is, why don't you know where Jay is, right? It's like it was. I don't know. I feel Jay's arc has the most, like, it could have been one of the better arcs, but it just missed potential.
Yeah,
completely.
I'm just thinking about the Keepers thing. If they just set him there on his own instead, they could have done the same exact thing and it would have worked much better, I think.
I don't know, pair him up with Benthelmar though. I'm just kidding.
Always down for more Bento. Give me Bento.
Yeah, I'm a Benthelmar stan, so like I'm always down for more Benthelmar.
I have to say, I find it very funny how at the beginning of the chapter they had to explicitly state that Jay and Nia were staying in separate rooms with separate beds. There was a whole
they were very clear about that.
What is up with the relationships in this book, you guys?
Well,
like,
I think that's a censorship thing. It's meant for kids and they can't imply that kind of stuff, but it was very funny how it was explicitly stated.
But then also, like, I read through the glossary because, anyway, it has a glossary. Yeah. And so in the glossary, it says that Skylar is Kai's girlfriend. And it's like, that's not, that's explicitly worked around in the show and in this story. It's like only at the end maybe hinted at. And then Pixel is a very close friend of Zane's, who knows them perhaps the best of anybody in the world, which I thought was very funny, coming off of Crystallized, which is like the most intensely this monologue about how their love transcends death. But no, they're just really close friends, guys.
That's how it be sometimes.
Yeah. Rips Zane.
Oh, Rips.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, it literally does say Skylar, although it does say Nia is Jay's girlfriend in the glossary, but it also says that Skylar's Kai, so I don't know how much I trust this.
Also, because, I mean, then they would also have to explain the yin-yang union in the glossary if they didn't say girlfriend, because according to Tommy, they are not married. And so my understanding is that it's like an engagement thing, but none of that's ever been confirmed.
I just noticed we also never talked about the Rotten Rabbits. What's up with them?
What?
Can I just say, FNAF vibes. We got evil rabbits coming to terrorize people.
Yeah, no, Chris. It's the gang that terrorized Kai at the beginning of his arc.
I legit forgot they existed.
I also forgot they existed. I'm looking at the glossary now.
Oh yeah, no, there. I remember when I saw this, because I remember the person who wrote Harumi's journal is the same author that wrote Kai and Zane's stories. It's Tracy West, and in Harumi's journal it was like Killo's original concept for the Sons of Garmadon, where like he wanted them to be this like the evil rabbit themed biker gang. So I thought they were like, wow, the author's really trying to get like evil rabbits into Ninjago for some reason. I kind of want to ask about that now. Like, is this like a secret agenda to get evil rabbits? Like. Okay, well, I think if we've summed up Cole, we've talked a lot about how we feel about the book as a whole, but I think a good way to probably wrap this up is if we each go around and maybe talk about how we would rank each of the stories. I know we've talked about favorites and least favorites. could be a fun way to wrap it up. I guess I can go first and give some folks some time to think about it, and then we can go in the order that we went through the stories. For me, I think number one, Zane. It's a story I've been wanting to see. Could it have been done better? Yes, but is it the best they could have done in a book, especially a book for kids that does tie back to a lot of moments in the show? Probably, yeah, it's probably the best they could have done. Second, for me, it's honestly, this might be a controversial opinion. It's a toss-up between Cole and Kai's. I think Cole's was nice, but it was just kind of chill. Kai's, I feel like the most things happened in it, but at the same time, the characterization for how he treated Skylar doesn't really sit right with me, but it was new characterization for him. So maybe maybe I would actually go Zane, Kai, Cole. And then I would say Jay's is my least favorite because of reasons that we just discussed. Just like, yeah, a lot of missed opportunity, but maybe that's a hot take. That's how I would rank it though.
For me, I think I would do pretty much the same with Kai and Cole swapped. Obviously Zane's I adore. Cole's So it's interesting because, as we said, like, we're not sure who the audience for this book really is. And now thinking about it, it's like almost as if there's two more childish stories and two more, like, quote-unquote mature themes. Because I don't know if the Cole and Zane stories are going to be exciting for kids, because they are, like, well, Zane's is just an introspective, look back at your own trauma, which, like, obviously is probably not the most fun read, but I really enjoyed it as an older fan. And Cole's was much lower key. That was just about, like, the relationship between his parents. But Kai's, like, while I agree some of the characterization was a bit off, there was very much a journey, and it felt like that one the most felt like it could have been an actual Ninjago episode. Mm-hmm. And then Jay's, while I wasn't a fan of, like, how convenient everything was, it again was a very similar thing where I feel like that could fit in the show, and I think especially kids reading that could still have a lot of fun with it. And I do think a lot of the interpersonal dynamics between the characters are a lot of fun, even if it is a little rehashy.
Yeah, no, for me, I'd go Cole first, because I don't know, that's me being the type of guy I am. I'm always a sucker for father and son stories. So Cole, and then Zane, obviously, and then I'm gonna go Jay, just because I really like the pairing of Jay and Nunagami. There is a lot of missed potential there, but I just didn't like Kai's story. So it's Cole, Zane, Kai, and Jay. Oh no, Cole, Zane, Jay, and Kai for me.
All right, I'm still debating in my head, so just know that these are all very close. Cole is my favorite because the wholesome vibes cannot be beat. I'm gonna say Jay is my second favorite story, probably just because of the, like, character interaction. I am a first half of season 11 defender. I don't care how wacky it gets, as long as we got some good character interaction, and the story gave that to me. And then probably Zane. As much as I like it, I do think upon reread it was a little less interesting, just because a lot of it is recounting scenes and stuff. Not to say it was bad, but and then Kai last, because I don't know, I don't have strong opinions on it, I guess. But again, those last three very close. It could be shuffled around. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling in this exact moment.
Okay, well, that was really cool to hear the rankings. I like how we each have, like, pretty different rankings for the most part. Like, we all got something different from the stories, which is cool. I mean, I guess Lego picked a good group to discuss this, because we aren't just all agreeing with each other, so that makes sense. I'm honestly, that's about all I have to say about the book from my end. Is there anything else before we wrap up? Anything else that you all wanted to say about the book, about how you felt about it, or are we all good?
I would just say I recommend you check it out if you have if you're able to buy it, or if there's, like, I'm sure it'll become, like, libraries. Any kids or even older fans, I think it is worth the read, because it's not super long. So, like, I think I read it in probably an hour, 30 minutes. But it was very fun, and it's like, I've not read some of the other, like, I haven't read Spajitsu Brothers or anything, but this makes me want to go check those kind of books out, because I did have a lot of fun with it. And even though I of course have my criticisms, I have my criticisms with the show too, and I still love it. So yeah, I recommend people go check it out.
Yeah, I would also recommend people checking it out. I think older fans probably will have more problems, especially if they're very nitpicky with details. But younger fans, I think they're gonna love the stories.
Yeah, just a straight up good time. I really enjoyed myself with this book. Also, read with tea. Sensei Wu recommends you drink some tea while you read it. And confirm, very good way to read this book.
Yes, indeed. This book does have a drink pairing to go with it that is explicitly stated at the very beginning. So there you go. Get some tea. Yeah, I think for me, definitely a recommend. I try to go out of my way to read all the canon Ninjago books. Stuff like this and Spinjitzu Brothers are the really important ones for me to read. And as a longtime Ninjago fan, it was really rewarding to go back and see a lot of references and callbacks, but also references that mattered. It wasn't references for the sake of references. It was calling back to things that really helped fuel the story. Whether it's Cole and Lao's relationship or Zane facing his trauma, there were a lot of really deep dives into Ninjago's history, which as a longtime fan I could appreciate, but also putting myself in the mindset of a kid checking this out for the first time, it provided enough information to really just hit the ground running. It recapped everything that you need to know about the show. You could read this book, not have seen a single episode of the show, and probably be okay for the most part. So I think that's a pretty cool thing, how they're able to juggle both audiences and please both old and new fans alike, which is something that as LEGO themes get older and as LEGO themes grow in age, they absolutely need to keep doing and to keep improving on. So yeah, overall, very positive. And I think with that, we have summed up our look at Quest for the Lost Powers coming to bookstores near you. This video is sponsored by the LEGO Group.
You have to insert the image, though. You have to insert the. When I do this, you just have
If
to.
we have the book, this is
I've got one too.
Yes, as you can see, the book that I have right here that LEGO sent to me on time and very
They
promptly.
sent us the
Thank
book.
you, LEGO.
They definitely did.
Yeah, this is
I got one of
such
these.
a
Does this work?
Hey, it's one of the fire fiends.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Actually, that's a missed opportunity. That's a real missed opportunity right there.
They could have
Yeah, like,
canonized the
straight up.
core whippers.
They could have canonized.
Could have canonized. Yeah. It's like a lost variation of Constrictire. Just like. Oh.
No, the
Okay.
mutated. They were just regular people that mutated because of the Fire Fang.
Proximity to the Fire Fang. I mean,
Yeah.
They just. Yeah.
It's
they
part
could
of-
have said something. Yeah.
It's part of the Fire Fang's powers that were not told in the show, but they had the powers to make people snakes.
Right. You just don't see it, but it happens. Oh. All right, and with that, we have summed up our discussion of the Ninjago Quest for the Lost Powers book. Definitely a pretty controversial one. I know that some people are definitely going to have wanted to see this stuff in the show. Some people are going to like one story better than another. And one thing I found that was really cool is that each of us actually had a different favorite story. For example, we all had different rankings. A lot of us did like Zane, but we had different rankings for every single one, which I thought was pretty cool. So we got different opinions on these stories themselves. Now, the only way that you can tell for sure and make up your own mind is by reading the book, which you can get from pretty much any bookstore right now, or I believe it's also available on Amazon. It should be available on lego.com at some point. No guarantees when that will happen. It may be up there right now. If it is, you can check it out in the link below. Otherwise, this has been our coverage of the Ninjago Quest for the Lost Powers book. Let me know down in the comments below if you want to see more collaborations with this group, and a big shout out to everybody who joined MyBrickOpinions, BricksByMind, and ParachutingKittens for joining me on this podcast journey to discuss the latest canon Ninjago content. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks so much, and bye for now. Okay, good.